Hey, what's going on, geeks? Max of the Beast is here. Max of the Beast is here. And welcome back to ranking Fortnite seasons live and on the air. So, where we last left off, we had just actually ranked season 6. But here's what I'm thinking, right? I kind of saved season 6 for the very end of the stream where my voice was starting to die, my energy was gone, and I don't think I did it. Let me go over and get the actual stream part. Here we go. Hello. I don't think I gave it the justice it may have deserved. So, as such, we're going to try again. We're going to re-rank season 6. I gave it an A and left it at that. I don't remember all that I said about it, but we're going to go over it again. So, this time, the Fortnite.gg map thing finally works. So, here we are on the Season 6 map. Let's see what changed, alright. So, in terms of POI changes, we had all these corrupted zones added all over the map. These had been added in by the end of Season 5. And there was a bunch of loot spots. You can get shadow stones. And then eventually, there was a hot spot of zombie spawns. As the season progressed, the floating island above Loot Lake here would rotate all around these spots and would raise them out the ground, creating like a little vortex thing. Season 6 was fairly controversial for multiple reasons. The POI is not really one of them. There weren't any new named POIs added during this season. It was just these spots. And of course the floating island that yoinked itself across the map. I wonder, does this show any of the big changes? I guess over time the original whirlpool thing in the middle of Loot Lake got smaller and smaller, but there wasn't that much going on. Except for here, I think it was during woo. Okay, if I zoom in, it's like doing a map comparison thing. Got it. I think Fatal Fields did get an update for when the start of Fort Nightmares hit. Fatal Fields got a haunted house thing going on with it. Had some spooky looking scarecrows and stuff in the cornfield. You can actually hide in the corn. The barn got turned into a haunted house. So it was all Halloween themed. But other than these very small, minuscule changes for Halloween and whatnot, and the changes to the corrupted zones and runes, not many map changes this go round. And no named POIs were added at the start of it. There was honestly not really any new POIs were added. There was just one change by which update are you? Oh yeah, by Fort Nightmares, the corrupted zones, after each one would get visited by the cube island, it would gain these geyser things that would bounce you around. Okay, there it is. So, we'll get into why this looks the way it does. But the big change happened to Loot Lake as well. Once again, not much changed except for Loot Lake. And it changed into Leaky Lake for a bit, and before going back to Loot Lake. But you can see fragments of the cube in the middle of it. Had this one little area surrounded by water. Most of these external islands were the same as previous Loot Lake, except there weren't as many islands beforehand. It was just because of all the nonsense going on here with the cube and whatnot. There was some loot in the middle of all this, and on the outskirts, A lot of loot in the center, which made it kind of chaotic to loot because you get down there to get the chest and you'd be surrounded by like 10 other people. This was caused by the season's big live event, which was the butterfly event, which I actually made it to. Really cool experience. I'll talk about it a bit more in a couple minutes, but yeah, that's why this is the way it is. But that's really all the map changes. Mostly centralized around Loot Lake and the other corrupted zones. Not much to write home about there, especially when comparing the past couple. Season 4 added the divot here. Season 5, the desert region. Season 6 just floated Loot Lake and made it move. But that wasn't why the season was controversial. The big reason was because of, well, firstly, let's talk about the Battle Pass. The Battle Pass was fairly strong. We had skins like Calamity, Dire, DJ Yonder, Fable, Dusk, and a few others that were fairly well received. I personally love a lot of the skins in that Battle Pass. Dire's one of my favorite tier 100s. And I still use skins like Fable and Calamity every now and again. So, strong Battle Pass in my opinion. But there was an issue with Calamity at the start of the season. Many of you are probably aware of it. But for those who aren't, well, let me give you a bit of Fortnite history. You know how the community has a tendency to how do you phrase it? Simp over a lot of the girl skins in the game. Yeah, that got worse because of Calamity. At least temporarily. Because for like a couple days at the start of Season 6, Calamity had jiggle physics. Yeah, she had some bouncy cleavage. She was already a simp skin. But the unintentional feature drew more attention to the skin. Epic quickly removed that, but the footage is out there, and it's not what you think. It's not like I know there's some other kind of footage out there of similar things, but this one's sort of safe for work. So, but yeah, that was one issue that some parts of the community liked. Others were like, "What the? It's a kids' game. Why is this in there? This game has kids in it, or kids playing it. What's going on here?" But whatever. That was that. It wasn't as big of a deal. It was only in the game for a couple days and then taken out. But the really big issue came around Halloween, when Fortnitemares hit. The first, well, technically there was like a Fortnitemares the year before, adding in the OG skins, Skull Trooper and Ghoul Trooper, and the pumpkin launcher. But the second one brought with it a whole host of new controversies with cube monsters. The first warm-up to the live event had the cube first split the floating island and then shoot fragments of itself all across the island, spawning in zombies. Were technically called cube monsters. They were essentially reskinned husks from Save the World that had different levels of difficulty. I actually made a video about the original Fortnitemares event, going in detail about all the different types of cube monsters, how to fight them, and like the benefits to fighting them, and how to take care of the spawners and stuff. But personally, I didn't have a problem with them, but I know a lot of the community did. Epic did add in a few ways to counter them as well. The Fiend Hunter's crossbow was added, which, as the name implies, was stronger against the zombies. While it did decent damage to players, it did like 40 body shots, 70 headshots, so pretty solid. infinite ammo, so can't complain too much. It didn't have the scope like the earlier crossbows did, but it was still fine to actually use against players in PvP. But when fighting against the zombies, it would two-shot body shot most of them, and would one-shot headshot most of the thin zombies, and then the brutes and the legendary brute would take a few shots to the head, but it did bonus damage against the zombies. They also added in the 6-shooter, which was fairly well received as well. Fun gun, and out of the two between Fiend Hunters and 6-shooter, the 6-shooter is what kind of remained in the game longer. They also made pickaxes do more damage against the spawners than guns. So you could destroy one of the zombie spawners by just shooting it, although getting in close and pickaxing it would do better. You could also get shields and loot from the zombies. You shoot at the zombies and they'll occasionally drop like ammo, materials, to like decent tier guns, utility items. I got a couple Rift to Goes from Cube Monsters and blue silence pistols and whatnot. And then the golden brutes, which were supposed to be like the boss enemies, would drop legendary items. So it was definitely worth your time to fight them. But the controversy was not like, oh, people were claiming that it was like pay to win, because not pay to win, but it was like overpowered in the sense of like you get healed up from killing the zombies, or you get good loot. The complaints came from how annoying they could be in hordes. Like, take Morgan's quote from The Walking Dead, if you will, where he said that, oh, by themselves, they're not much to look at, they're not too dangerous. But when they're hungry, all riled up and hungry in a group, they're dangerous. I really butchered that, but you get the idea. That's when they're a problem, when they're all in a horde. Same logic applies here. Because the zombies didn't do too much damage by themselves. The brutes could pack a decent wallop, and some of the skinnier ones, the skinny purple ones, the skinny pink ones could throw fireballs that did damage. But they weren't like, if you got smacked by a zombie, you could heal back up pretty quickly just by literally shooting the thing or hitting it with your pickaxe, because again, they would give you shields. But if you got in a group of them, they could be problematic. They'd also tear through buildings. Again, one or two of them would take a fair bit of time. A horde of them would just smack through it, would just keep coming at you until you took care of it. The big problem became trying to manage fights between zombies and players, because sometimes you get sandwiched in between somebody shooting at you while managing the entirety of The Walking Dead behind you. So you'd be fighting somebody in front of you, hitting with like rocket launchers and sniping at you, whatnot, and then having to deal with zombies busting down your builds. Like you build up cover and then the horde knocks it down again. It became annoying to fight people when you had a lot of enemies behind you. They also added in glider redeploy during this time, so fall damage was pretty much improbable at this point, because if you jumped off a high enough height, you could pull out your glider again and float away. Useful for rotating, useful for getting out of stressful situations, but also could be annoying because, well, people could just run away. I can understand this. I've also had some complaints with, people just fleeing the scene of the crime, but I don't think it was as bad as people thought it was. Because again, it wasn't like a launch pad that would boost you up in the air first and then let you glide away. It was just like you'd start immediately falling, but you'd glide down so you wouldn't take fall damage. So if you had high ground, you could still just shoot down at the person. I don't know. It was an interesting test phase, and they eventually redid this feature and made it into an item where you could just grab a glider item, it would take up an inventory slot, and then you could activate glider redeploy as long as you had those items. So it was definitely an interesting test run to utilize infinite glider redeploy during this period, but added on with all the other nonsense going on with the zombies and obscure map changes, and you had yourself a lot of complaining people. Personally, I didn't really mind any of these. I was fine with glider redeploy. I didn't hate the zombies for both times they showed up en masse. I found them kind of fun. But I can also understand how they could be annoying to some people. But me personally, I didn't hate them. Controversial opinion, I know, but I didn't hate the zombies. But overall, I am going to stick with the original rating that I gave Season 6. Again, it's because of all this controversy and stuff that I give it lower rating. And also because I just don't think I had as much fun in Season 6 as I did the other ones here. But I'm going to give it an A. It had a cool live event, which gave you a back bling. You're supposed to get a glider too, but I only got the back bling. Don't know what the deal was with that, but whatever. The live event was cool. Introduced some lore implications with the interior of the 0 point. I believe some people refer to it as the butterfly dimension. And yeah, I think that's all she wrote with that. The live event was cool again. It then introduced kind of like a POI that was just a one and done thing, the Leaky Lake, which then changed into the Vault at Loot Lake and whatever. It was a cool live event. That's all I'm going to say about that one. So Season 6 gets an A. Not the greatest, not the worst, definitely controversial. I had fun, had a solid battle pass, and I didn't mind a lot of the changes, but I don't think it was as good as some of the previous ones. Season 7, another highly controversial one. It was one of the last seasons I played consistently. But it was honestly one of my favorites. Firstly, let's talk about map changes, because this one trumps Season 5's map changes. I mean, partially because the ice biome here takes up far more than the desert biome did. Like, look at the difference here. This added in 3 new name POIs and also impacted several others. It added in, I don't know why this map isn't showing names, but down here we had Happy Hamlet. Here we had, I don't know if you can see my mouse, it's kind of hard to see. I'm going to kind of wave it next to it here. I know it's kind of difficult to see because it blends in perfectly with the snow. But we have the location far left here, Frosty Flights, again, for those who couldn't see it. A Happy Hamlet's right here. They got rid of Flush Factory, which no one really missed. And then it also impacted Shifty Shafts, Tilted Towers, Snobby Shores, partially, and Greasy Grove. Oh yeah, we also had Polar Peak up here too, which is the giant mountain thing you see here, which is only has a couple things peeking out at this point. But in And also a bunch of unnamed POIs, unnamed locations. Had a bunch of Sergeant Winter's faction had like outposts scattered around. And other outposts were scattered around other parts of the map too. There was one up here close to Lazy Links, another one close to Pleasant Park. There are a couple more too. One close to Lonely Lodge. I thought there was one in the desert. Maybe. I don't know, I'm not seeing it. If there was, maybe it was established later on in the season. I thought there was one there, but I guess not. Oh yeah, there was also one near Dusty Divot. But it added in all of this, which I loved the desert, and I also really liked the snow biome as well. But at the start of this, honestly, I think this is probably the most hype I'd been. It was another major biome change, major biome added, a lot of new areas to explore, and lots more to see and do. One of my least favorite changes, though, was what they did to my baby over here. For those of you who don't know, my Chapter 1 drop spot was Greasy Grove. I had two. It was Greasy Grove and Dusty Divot. And Greasy Grove was done away with during this season. Instead, it was frozen over, and all that you could loot were the handful of buildings which roofs reached over top of the ice. And again, you could only loot the roofs of the 4 houses you see here. The middle building here, you could actually get into and look around in, and it was kind of cool because once you got into the main section of the building, you could look out into the frozen street where you could see cars and street signs stuck in the ice, and that was a cool detail. One of the most infuriating details, though, is that in this building, the center building here in Greasy Grove, there is a chest hidden in the wall. Well, if you broke through that wall, you'd hit ice. The chest could still spawn in there. It could still spawn in that little room, but you couldn't get to it because the ice was in the way. If in the part of the building, like right in the very corner, right in the very bottom part right here, where my mouse is, the tip of my mouse, that's where that chest could spawn. If you were to go back outside of the building and try to bust in through the roof, you could break the roof, but you'd also be blocked off by ice there too. There was no way to get that chest. It was the most infuriating thing ever. Trying to loot this building, there'd be that one chest there that you just couldn't get. You could hear it, you knew it was there, you could even see it, but you just couldn't get to it. But they got rid of Greasy Grove. Garbage season. We're gonna give season 7 for this reason an F tier. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Don't crucify me yet. I'm not done. So, map changes though, other than Greasy Grove, other than what they did with Greasy Grove, were very good. I like the new POIs. I like the new biome. It's very disproportionate to the desert biome. So between the two additions, the snow biome for some reason got like 10 times larger. But whatever. But over the season, the polar peak would begin to change. So 701, not much to talk about here. For some reason, it got brighter. 7.10. It went a while without much update. But by this point, you can see that polar peak has really changed. More buildings were had unthawed, and the castle here at the very top of the mountain was fully explorable. It had a lot of loot, and then the lower sections of the castle would continue to unthaw as the season progressed. making it just like Dusty Divot, a really cool POI in the sense of its evolution. Where as the seasons I guess as the seasons progress, but as the season progressed, the POI would evolve with it, which was, in my opinion, really cool. And then it had some story implications too, with some stuff that was revealed as the ice continued to melt away in the lower sections of the castle. So that was cool. We had like some dragon eggs show up, and also a dungeon room with a person suspended in ice who would eventually fall out, and that was your secret skin, the prisoner. But I guess on the topic of the secret skin, let's go ahead and talk about the Battle Pass. Season 7 had one of my favorites. Again, a lot of Chapter 1's Battle Passes I loved. And I still love. In my opinion, the most underrated Tier 100 is the Ice King. I know some people are going to say, oh, what about Lux? Because no one talked about Lux. Oh, people talked about her because how much they didn't like her. Sure, she's underrated in terms of actual quality because it's a solid skin. We'll talk more about Lux when we get to Season 8. But at least she was talked about. The Ice King, no one talked about this thing. It was one of the coolest looking skins, and while compared to previous Tier 100s that had additional styles, it didn't have the most jarring changes. Like, Ragnarok had the progressive evolution of like bones being added onto his armor, a growing beard, and eventually the giant skull, and then eventually the glowy horns on the skull. We didn't have that or Dire turning into a werewolf with every style. We didn't have that sort of just progressive evolution to the skin like we did with those previous ones. But the Ice King still had some pretty dope styles. Had like a gold one, had just default blue, a silver one, and then a dope black and red one. I really liked the styles to it. It wasn't too jarring. They weren't as crazy as some of the previous Tier 100s we had. But it was still a really cool skin, but nobody talked about it. At least I didn't hear anybody talk about it. And I still don't hear anybody talk about it. When I hear people talking about what Tier 100 skins they wish they had, it's usually something like the Reaper, Omega, Ragnarok, Black Knight. Nobody talks about the Ice King. I haven't seen anybody talk about the Ice King. He's one of my favorite Tier 100s. And is a really cool skin. We also had 2 legendaries at the very start with Lynx and Zenith. And they had some really cool styles. Also had Sergeant Winter, Trog, Onesie, and Powder. There's one more that am I missing one more? I have Zenith, Lynx, Trog, Powder, Onesie, Ice King, Sergeant Winter. I think that's it. Oh, and the Prisoner as a secret skin. So solid Battle Pass all in all. Really cool skins. A lot of which I still use. I still use the Ice King now and again. Still use Lynx every now and again. I've been meaning to use a couple of those skins again. Some of those skins again. But solid Battle Pass. I wish I had the secret skin once again. Didn't get any of them from Chapter 1, which I'm still a little peeved about. But whatever. In terms of some other changes that were added to the game. Let's think weapons for a second. Towards the end of Season 6, we had the legendary variants of the pump and tack shotguns added in, and those became a bit more common in Season 7. We also had wraps. Wraps were added during Season 7, and those were really cool. People really liked them, and they've stuck with the game ever since. So now we can play CSGO and Fortnite, comparing how many weapon skins we have. When's the Hyper Beast coming in shop, by the way? When can we get Hyper Beast? CSGO collab win? But in all seriousness, wraps were added. Eventually, the silenced sniper was put in. The regular bolt was removed. So you would have... I don't think the hunting rifle was in at this point either. Well, hunting rifle stayed for a bit of Season 7, but eventually got faulted, and only two snipers you had were suppressed and heavy. Because the semi was vaulted towards the end of Season 6. And here's one, I don't remember too many of them. Oh, except for one. Yeah, probably the biggest controversy was a weapon that could be found in the dead center here of Polar Peak. See this little central plaza location with the little stone thing here, stone square? At the very center of that was a pedestal with the first crossover mythic. Because fun fact, Epic Games also made the mobile games Infinity Blade. And the titular weapon from that game was added into Fortnite. You could wield the Infinity Blade in Fortnite. And you would get it from pulling it from the pedestal at the top of Polar Peak from the pedestal in the middle of the POI. Of course, it was heavily contested. So you'd be in for a heck of a fight to get to the thing. But if you could manage to steal the sword before anybody else did, or kill everybody in the location and take the sword for yourself, you'd be given the first official main mythic that could be obtained in the regular game. Because technically, the Infinity Gauntlet was the first mythic, but you can only get that one in the Thanos mode, in the Avengers game mode. This time, the sword could be gotten in the regular base game. So it was the first in-game, base game, mythic item, mythic weapon. And it was overpowered. It was absolutely busted. It did 75 damage a swing. I think at the start it did even more. You get health on kill. You could still build while wielding the thing. And you gain extra health and shield while you used it. And your shield would continuously regenerate as long as you held it. Granted, it was a slow regen, but if you just chilled out for a minute, your shield would just continue to regen until you got full again. While it would make you drop every single other item in your inventory, all your meds, all your weapons, all of that would be dropped. You keep your mats so you can still build while using the sword. You got a whole host of crazy attacks you could do with the thing. It would shred through builds. Again, it did a lot of damage. You got a jump attack, which would propel you a massive distance away. So you could, if you've ever felt threatened, you could run away pretty quickly. It was an absolute nightmare to deal with. At this time, I had wanted some melee options for Fortnite because as you booted up the game, back in the old days, the screen you'd be greeted with was a Save the World image with one of the characters holding a katana. And I wanted something like that in game, where you could use like a sword to fight. That wasn't what I had in mind. But in most cases, unless you got seriously outplayed or outsmarted, the sword was an easy win. As was the case when one of the big Fortnite tournaments rolled around during Season 7. During this period, which the prize pool for this tournament was $1 million. And somebody got in there with the sword and absolutely just shredded the lobby. It was the final couple circles, absolute crazy build fights. This dude just jumped through them with the sword's jump attack and just shredded like 10 people. And won the whole thing because of the sword. And that was the big wake-up call because people have been complaining about how busted the sword was for as long as the thing had been out. But it wasn't until the tournament came around that Epic really saw just how big of an issue the thing was before removing it. Some other changes added around the map were zip lines. Zip lining was added, and at first, like nowadays, zip lines are still very much a thing. But if you were to jump off of a zip line, you get some invincibility frames in terms of fall damage. So you can jump off. If you get like shot at while you're on a zip line, you can just jump off. You can still take damage from their bullets, obviously. But if you jumped off of a very high zip line and landed on the ground, you wouldn't take fall damage. Back in this time period, you could fall off of a zip line and die of fall damage. And they also didn't have the prompt to latch onto them like they do now. Instead, you just jumped onto them and you'd automatically attach onto it, which could lead to some obvious problems if you missed. But as finicky as they could be, zip lines weren't really complained about. They're a cool addition, which could get you from place to place pretty quickly. Good method of rotation, as well as claiming high ground, and also staying mobile. Because it was kind of difficult to hit somebody on a zip line unless you position yourself on the other end, where you could just like shoot up or down at the person. The big complaint for Season 7, though, was the addition of planes, because one thing that you will notice in the Fortnite community is they have no idea how to deal with anything above them. If somebody can fly, everyone just immediately just strokes, has a collective stroke. Sure, the turrets on the planes could shred through builds. Sure, the boost on the plane could shred through builds and do kamikaze attacks. Sure, the turrets could do some pretty good damage as well. But if you literally just looked up and shot at the plane, you could probably take it down. The common denominator with a lot of these cases is that people just tend to try to outbuild things versus actually try to fight back. They'll shoot at stuff only when it's like a last resort. They'll just crank boxes and 90s at people, at these vehicles, and expect that to get them through it. It won't. Just build what you need to do to protect yourself in the short term. Focus fire on whatever it is. Either deter it or destroy it. In my opinion, planes weren't as bad as people made them out to be. Could they be annoying, especially when they third-partied you? Definitely. But third parties in general can be annoying, regardless of if they're using a vehicle or not. Planes could be countered, weren't as bad as people made them out to be. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. There was also a live event for the season. The Ice King event, which covered the entirety of the map in snow. Which was the first time I got to see the snowy desert, which looked weird. But essentially, the Ice King had floated above Polar Peak, projected a giant ghostly form of himself, and then caused a giant blizzard which covered the entire island in snow and had a long-lasting fog effect. He also used fragments from Kevin the Cube, which had some implications that, maybe the cube's not gone forever. Maybe it wasn't as destroyed as we thought it was. Which had some people speculating about that. And also about his purposes. Was he a villain? Was he a hero? What was he? What was the Ice King? I should do like a lore synopsis thing from my understanding of some of this stuff, because the Chapter 1 lore doesn't get talked about as much. Which is kind of sad, but whatever. We'll deal with that another day. Unless you folks want me to get into it, in which case let me know. And I'll tangent. Some people weren't the biggest fan of the fog. I didn't mind it. It's kind of cool. Sometimes it would fade away briefly. But the thing that people really complained about with this event, because like the event itself people liked, it was cool. Because snow season. But the thing that people really didn't like was the return of the zombies. Because I don't know why Epic just reused the same thing again. But after the event, frozen versions of the zombie spawners popped up across the island and would spawn, you guessed it, frozen versions of the cube monsters. It was the same rule would apply to dealing with them. The crossbow came back to fight against them. And again, see my comments on the cube monsters from Season 6. My opinion didn't change between the two. Didn't hate them. Didn't love them. Was kind of just content with them. Thought they were kind of cool in stages. But I can definitely understand how some people weren't the biggest fans of them. So I'm not going to say any more about the cube zombies or frozen zombies. It was a little bit lazy to just like reuse the same thing again for this event like they did for Fortnite, but hindsight's 2020, I guess. At the time, I didn't really care. I was having fun with Fortnite again. I really enjoyed Season 7. It was a fun season with a bunch of crazy new additions. The snow thing here obviously isn't permanent. As time progressed, the map would eventually return to normal. Although, of course, the ice biome down here was permanent. Stayed with it for the rest of the chapter. And that's really all she wrote in terms of map changes. Oh, wait, no, there's one more thing. Risky Reels. When did this happen? So, I kind of forgot to mention this. The block was added. Really hit or miss. It was a cool idea. I kind of forgot to talk about it when I talked about map changes. Honestly, because I kind of forgot it existed. Until I saw this. Really cool concept. Really cool idea. To have the community-made locations added in every once in a while to the block. Where literally Epic would put people's creations on the map at the block. It killed Risky Reels, though. Not a fan of that one. So Epic, like, there's a lot of empty space over here. You could have thrown it on top of, like, this. You could have put the block here. Crushed that. Put that there. Because it literally, eventually, they did move the block over here. During Season 8, they moved the block over here. But instead they just crushed Risky Reels for no reason with this. And for a while after its edition, though, it was literally just that. It was just a block. It was just the rectangle, or just a square. There was nothing there. And then eventually, over time, they started putting in fan-made POIs and stuff. That was cool. But they were really hit or miss. Some were good, some were bad, some were difficult to navigate, some were really cool looking in concept, but were kind of difficult to actually play. Another thing I should mention before we wrap up Season 7 were some changes to Wailing Woods. Where this section here, there were a couple like cabins added around the woods. There was also another bunker added deep in Wailing Woods. But the big thing was big thing going on was that the corrupted zone finally was starting to regrow. You could still see like remnants of it. You can see remnants of all of them. Stuck around for most of this end of the season. Most of them kind of grown over, but the weird jagged rock stuck around for a bit. However, Wailing Woods' segment remained kind of wilted and ruined for quite some time. Then this facility, a lot of the rifts after Season 5 began to vanish, and especially after the cube showed up and the big giant crack in the sky vanished. A lot of the rifts just were gone. But from Season 6 and 7, Wailing Woods became the place where you could find some of the last rifts. Rift to Goes were added too, so you could still technically rift around the map if you found one of those. But in terms of the actual rifts themselves, you could find them, and there was like another governmental bunker vault thing under the center ranger station looking place maze in the center of Wailing Woods. There's a whole facility under there with teleporters that would take you to the various cabins across the place, as well as a couple rifts that you could use to rotate out of the POI. Just kind of wanted to mention that because it was another really cool secret thing they added into Wailing Woods. Not too terribly many people knew about it until Luke the Notable uploaded his 100 Drops Wailing Woods, where he dropped into this section a lot and showed off the bunker in detail. But it was still one of those like really cool secret things that they continued to add throughout Chapter 1 that I'm really appreciative for, and they did a really cool job with it throughout Seasons 6 and 7. As well as the evolution of the former corrupted zones with them, most of them healing over. The ground still looking weird in some parts, but mostly recovering. Really cool attention to detail with that. But with all this said and done, let's get to the last part of the map here. Some of the snow did start to recede a little bit. Tilted was sort of covered up by snow, partially, towards the middle of Season 7. But by the end, the snow was finally restricted from the bottom of Snobby Shores on. So, mostly just from Viking Village all the way down here. Tilted was no longer affected. Snobby was no longer affected. It was just here on out. The snow biome just stayed within its borders here. But towards the end of Season 7, there were earthquakes causing massive tears in the ground across the map. One busted up the unlucky building in Tilted Towers. Others appeared closer and closer to Wailing Woods, giving people the impression that something was about to happen. And that something was Season 8. But before we head on to the next season, it's time to actually give Season 7 its official, not F, rating. In my honest opinion, I had an absolute blast during Season 7. The POIs were really cool. I didn't hate the planes or the zombies. And I loved the battle pass. Loved the map. Weapons were fun. Some of the new additions were cool as well. Pun completely intended. But with all these factors in mind, I'm going to give Season 7 an S. Not an S+, because I will be honest. I had a blast with it, but because of all the critiques that's been given, justly so, some of them justly so, and the sword especially, S is where it's going to sit. S for sword. Moving on, Season 8. Here we go. Now, Season 8, for me. Before we get into any of the map changes or any of the gameplay changes or anything of that nature, Season 8 was when I started growing out of Fortnite. Although, most of it wasn't really intentional. At the start of Season 8, I played it just as I played every other season. Just load it in, play as usual. However, as the season progressed, I don't know what happened, but it became too demanding for my computer to handle. My computer at the time couldn't handle it. Locations wouldn't render in properly. I'd drop out of the sky and there'd be unrendered buildings. When I land on top of them, my character would glitch around and I get shot from somebody who had obviously been able to land into a stable building, grab a gun, and deal with the guy spazzing out on the roof of a neighboring house. I just couldn't play the game. It became unplayable. And then also the Fortnite, what I like to call the Fortnite hate train, started to kick in. Where this was kind of the point where it was the cool thing to do to hate Fortnite, to think it was a cringy kids game. And all those opinions being spewed out online was starting to get to me. Starting to reflect onto me. I started to mirror them, mimic them. And as a dumb kid, I let my opinions be dictated by, excuse me, by some people on the interwebs. Which sucked because Season 8 was pretty fun, and I did actually enjoy the time that I played when the game would work. But it was the fact that I was starting to have difficulties actually physically playing the game. Not because I didn't want to at first, but because it was by closer to mid-season that I played for a few weeks into Season 8. I got the Battle Pass, made it a decent way through it, and then stopped because the game became virtually unplayable. I was hoping, I tried playing with settings, turning stuff down. Nothing worked. I don't know what happened with it. But what I do know is that it was unplayable. And the literal ability to be unable to play the game, in addition to the growing hatred towards Fortnite from a lot of the interwebs, some of my friends, and then those opinions began to reflect onto me, and I became part of this Fortnite hate train, drove me away from the game. Now, back off of me and also the game for a bit, because again, I did enjoy Season 8. Let's talk about the stuff that I really liked. The map changes. Well, the map changes. Lazy Links is gone, and instead is Lazy Lagoon, a pirate-themed location with a lot of water and a pirate ship and a little pirate village. Cool POI. Again, see, Chapter 1's water was really gross. You just kind of wade through it in the water in the middle part of the map. Out here, it would kill you. You could build through it. It could be kind of finicky. You'd lose your items in there constantly because stuff wouldn't float. If you killed somebody, or if you accidentally dropped something, it was pretty much gone forever. Unless something like ammo or stacked mini shields or something like that, we can just walk back into it and it'll pick it back up for you. But it made navigating kind of difficult unless you use the pier here or landed directly onto it. But any other angle, you'd have to wade through all this water. Thankfully, there were ways to get around it too. There were pirate cannons. Cannons were added in as one of the couple vehicles that was added during the season. Where you could use them solo for sure, but it was definitely a duo. It was definitely built for duos and squad modes in mind, where one player can push the cannon while the other person sits inside the barrel, and then the person pushing it could fire the person out of the cannon, sending them flying in one direction until they landed, which could break through builds and could also do damage if you manage to shoot somebody with yourself, or you could also fire a cannonball to do damage. That was fun. Those were definitely fun. Another big addition for vehicles were the ballers, which you could find more of the Sergeant Winners group. Yeah, that group continued to stick around after Season 7 and established a couple more recon facilities. One close to this weird geyser place, which had an extension over here, close to Sunny Steps. Another one towards the edge of the map. And then all the other ones across the map got updated as well. And Frosty Flights, all of these locations could spawn the baller, which was a hamster ball looking thing with a plunger on it that you could use to grapple around. Honestly, these were never overpowered. They were a bit too tanky at the start. They couldn't do damage to you unless you slammed into somebody with it while using boost, but that was kind of difficult to do sometimes. In terms of its offensive capabilities, it was very niche. Only in very selective situations could you actually use a baller to fight. Usually it was just good for rotations, for getting the heck out of dodge, and just for memeing. They were fun. They were a fun vehicle. The only problem was that they were kind of too good at what they did, and they could be bullet spongy at the very start. So by the end of the game, you can sometimes encounter like 3 people who just sit in the ballers and would try to hamster ball each other to death. There's a clip of, I think one of the clips that went viral was Dakota's, one of his streams. He was in a final circle with 2 other guys, and the 3 of them were in hamster balls, just bumping up against each other. And so they eventually pushed each other into zone, and it became a who had more health fight. Some people became annoyed of how many rounds came down to who had the ball and who could just like roll around and whatever, and it could just eat bullets. So eventually the ballers' health got nerfed a little bit, so they became less tanky. You could shoot through them pretty quickly, but they were still just as good for mobility and rotation. So again, needed nerf to make them less of a crutch, but at the same time they were definitely a solid vehicle and a fun addition. What else happened? Okay, back to the map changes. Tomato Temple. No longer was it named POI. It became an unnamed POI. And was reduced tremendously in size. The entire right-hand corner, right top corner of the map became the jungle biome. The game's 3rd and final biome added. Tomato Temple was just reduced to the temple itself up here in the corner. Just kind of sat there. Its geography changed tremendously. The old underpass that would take you out of the Tomato Town, Tomato Temple area into the rest of the map was covered in lava from the volcano. The volcano itself was an unnamed location with some Sunny Steps themed stuff at the top, like I think a ritual sacrifice is going to be done there. And in the interior, it was clear that the prisoner was the Fire King, and he had set up his own little throne room in the underside of the volcano. If you could land at the very top of it, or in the side here, front thing here, glide on in. There was a fair bit of loot around here on top of it. In the middle, there was a couple platforms you could land on and grab loot. And then closer to the throne, you could grab some chests there too. Loot was kind of meager. There was also some stuff scattered around on the little islands out here. There were also pirate outposts scattered around the map. One here. The old ruined house close to in between Tilted and Dusty became a pirate outpost. And there were a few others added across the map too, which could spawn ballers and cannons and stuff. But the volcano itself was a cool unnamed POI. It should have gotten a name, honestly. It should have been named just the volcano, or even with something as boring as the volcano. It should have gotten a name because it was a cool looking location. You could also fly up the volcano. If you jumped out into the lava of the volcano, lava part of the volcano, you could, in some areas, start flying, and you could fly yourself out of the volcano, get redeploy and glide someplace else. So if you jumped into loot, or if you dropped like Sunny Steps or someplace, you could jump in the volcano and glide again. There are also geysers scattered around here. I think that's one there, and there's a bunch of them scattered around this thing, which had a pirate thing here too, which you could use to. The geysers could be used as permanent launch pads. And then Sunny Steps, one of my favorite POIs from Chapter 1. It didn't stick around very long, but for the last 2 seasons of the chapter, last few seasons of the chapter, Sunny Steps was a location that really enjoyed. It was really cool Aztec theme, and not too much to say about it. Loot was solid. It was a really good loot spot. It had a lot of chests that spawned there. It was a good and very underrated. You wouldn't have much traffic going to Sunny Steps, so if you needed loot, just drop there. You'd be mostly uncontested unless like 1 or 2 people went there with you. The block was moved over here. Whatever. Don't care about you. Then we'll get more into the map as we get into the Season 8's conclusion. But let's talk about some other stuff. That's about the loot pool. We talked about the vehicles, kind of counting them into the items added. But some other really cool additions were the flintlock pistol. It was probably the biggest highlight for me. One of my favorite items. It did a solid bit of damage, but its big claim to fame was the tremendous amount of knockback damage it did to other people, as well as the knockback it did to you. So you could land a hit and get jumped back, but its biggest use was as utility, where if you jumped off of a high height, gliders at this point had been added in as items you could pick up and hold in one of your inventory slots, so you could have glider redeploy. But in the event that you didn't have gliders, or a launch pad to save yourself with, or anything of that nature, if you fell off a really high height, you could always pull out your trusty flintlock pistol, aim it at the ground below you, fire it off, and you jet yourself up in the air and save yourself at the last second. It was a good utility to save yourself from fall damage, or you could also use it to get some good high ground, and again, its damage was solid, so it was definitely a competent weapon. Honestly, one of my favorites, and at this point in time, it's in the game again as part of the Wild Week, so I haven't had as much time to play as I would have liked to since the Wild Week started, but looking forward to jump back into that and playing with the flintlock pistol again because that was a fun item. Yeah, flintlock was added. What else? I think what else was added in Season 8 in terms of weapons? Give me just a second. I'm gonna googly that real quick. See. Thankfully, the wiki page shows everything. Oh, that's right, that's right. Just need a bit of a refresher. We're good now. Another item that I can't believe I forgot that it was added this season. I thought it was added season 9, honestly. But the infantry rifle. One of my favorite weapons, honestly. I like the accuracy. And also the not legendary version of it. It might have been actually added to season 7, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe like late season 7, but it really got like some changes in season 8. As well as a legendary and epic version. But the sound of the uncommon and rare was the classic Lee Enfield ping. Bloody beautiful. Bloody beautiful. The boom bow was also added, which was kind of controversial because it did a decent bit of damage, but it did honestly less than most snipers at the time, so honestly, whatever. Boom bow was cool. Use shotgun ammo. So if you were to rock it alongside a shotgun, you'd be eating up your ammo supply with the boom bow too. So make sure you had a lot of shells if you wanted to use that thing. And then there was also the Avengers Endgame event, which added in a bunch of Marvel-themed items, just not to the base game, but instead once again to an LTM. But other than that, not much to say about Season 8's weapons. There was also, though, the treasure maps were added in. And those were cool. You could grab one of those. It would mark a random spot on the map with a large beacon of light. You go to it, pickaxe the ground for a few seconds, dig up a buried treasure chest, open the thing up, and you got some free legendaries. Honestly, really cool, really powerful if you found one of those. Really good item. And the concept got reused again, too, which we'll talk about later. Like, really later. Probably a different stream, honestly. But, yeah. The treasure maps are really good. And what else? Oh, airstrikes. The Sweats complained about these because they would bust through builds pretty quickly. They had a lot of missiles that would fall out the sky at you, and it did a good bit of damage. So these revolted decently quickly. They were nerfed a little bit and reworked again to be reused at a later date. I don't have many memories of the airstrike in Season 8. Chapter 1, Season 8. I think by this point I kind of quit. But that's that. In terms of items. Now, there was another live event for Season 8. Over time, some parts of the map did begin to experience some changes. The unlucky building in Tilted became that no sweat insurance building. And some restaurants that got displaced because of the volcanoes literally spawning in that region. Like good old Tomato Town. There was more representation to those locations added into Retail Row. The Pizza Place was added into Retail Row. There was like a smaller version of it. Greasy Grove's Der Burger already had a branch out there too, ever since Greasy Grove got frozen over. So we now had both of the big name restaurants in Fortnite competing in one territory. That was interesting to see. But as the season progressed, once again our attention was driven over to Loot Lake. Again, not too much changed for a bit. There were some more smaller unnamed locations added here or there. A lot of these I don't really have a lot of memories with because I didn't play for most of it. I did make it back for the event. Oh, there it is. You could see it right there. The tomato building, the pizza pit was added in right there into Retail Row. And also the meteorite and the dusty divot was long gone. But where it once sat cracked open and lava began pumping out of it. Which led into the Floor is Lava LTM, which I didn't play stupidly enough, but I heard it was a lot of fun and watched gameplay of it, and it looked pretty sick, and I wish I played it. Here it is. Our attention once again was driven over to Loot Lake, where a secret vault was uncovered by that governmental organization that set up shop in Wailing Woods and Dusty Divot. A helicopter had been seen moving across the map several times throughout the season. Like, it wasn't an actual moving vehicle, but you could see it. It'd be parked in various locations across the map, and people were watching it for weeks before it finally settled over here, looking over this mysterious vault thing, before eventually, similar to Season 6 with the runes, you had to assemble another set of runes, some of different shapes, obviously, different symbols, obviously. But you would assemble these cyborg or robotic rune things around the vault for challenges. And over time, you get more and more of them assembled, leading up to the season's live event. Before we get into the hype that brought, let's start with the Battle Pass. I didn't get as far as I would have wanted into this one because there were still a few skins that I would have liked to have now. I don't have Peely, I don't have Ember, I don't have Keymaster, I don't have... I think Lux is the only other skin in that group, because I have Sidewinder, Hybrid, and... the pirate dude's name. Whatever his name is. Blackheart. The Tier 100 skin was the worst Tier 100 skin. One of the worst Tier 100 skins ever added to the game. It's, in terms of skin quality itself, isn't terrible. It really isn't. Lux is a pretty Lux is a pretty cool skin. I would have liked it. However, it doesn't deserve Tier 100. I think everyone agrees with it. Will agree with me on that one. It didn't deserve Tier 100. Solid skin. If it were lower in the Battle Pass, I think people would have loved it. Would have really liked it. It had a lot of decent colors. In terms of like its selectable styles were different outfit colors. But compared to all the previous Tier 100s, everyone was expecting its additional styles to, change it up somewhat. But it took the Ice King route of just changing up the colors of the skin's outfit. Which worked with the Ice King because it was already cool looking skin. The skin and the additional styles and colors really helped the Ice King. But for Lux, it didn't do anything. It was a basic looking skin. It was a solid looking skin, but kind of basic in comparison to the previous Tier 100s. And people were pretty disappointed with it. For understandable reasons. The secret skin was Ruin. Which again, I don't hear anybody talking about it. Cool looking skin. Wish I got it. But there's not too much to talk about with it. It's not the greatest Tier 100. It's not the greatest secret skin. Not the most memorable, honestly. And obviously, because not many people talk about the thing. But yeah. But in terms of let's get back into the conversation about the map and about the upcoming live event. A couple of things that people were noticing. The eggs in Polar Peak were missing. These were confirmed to be hybrid. Moved from Polar Peak, the prison area at Polar Peak, over to the volcano. The prisoner had taken the eggs with him, or either taken them when he first left, or had gone back and taken the eggs from Polar Peak, incubated them and hatched them in the volcano, and those turned out to be hybrid, his loyal servants. So some changes going on at Polar Peak, suggesting that something might be going on here once again. But again, some people paid attention to this, some people didn't. Of course, everyone's eyes were still stuck on the vault. Last update of the season. Not much to really write home about. But then we're going to pop into the vault. Pop into what is referred to as the Unvaulting event, or the Volcano event. Essentially, the vault opened up, and players were teleported into the realm of the 0 point, or the containment area of the 0 point, which is our first introduction to one of the game's biggest plot points. That being the 0 point, or the center point of reality itself, of all realities. It was being housed in the vault, but no one was paying attention to the thing. It was like, oh, cool, weird glowy orb, but there was also a desk with Singularity's helmet on it. No one really paid too much attention to that either. It's like, okay, cool. Everyone's eyes, until Retrospect kicked in, you can watch YouTube videos on it, or replay your own footage of it, or just thought about it more. Like, oh yeah, what were these small details no one really talked about? Oh yeah, there was this giant glowy orb thing and some helmet sitting on a desk. Whatever. Those details were kind of overlooked, but they had some serious lore implications, and were really cool being able to see the 0 point for the first time, as well as some hints to the future of some characters that would be crucial to the game's story. But some of the biggest controversies, yet some biggest of the hype. Wow, I can English, I swear. The most hype, but also controversial aspect of this event was the ability to vote for items to be unvaulted. The items up for debate, up for re-edition, were the grappler, bounce pads, the Stormwing planes, the Infinity Blade, the TAC SMG, and the drum gun. I may have mentioned this during my talk about late Season 4 and Season 5, but the drum gun was a highly controversial weapon. It could tear through builds, it did a lot of damage. I'll mention this again. It was a pretty well-hated weapon because people found it overpowered, people thought it was broken. In my opinion, it could be, but it got nerfed a couple times. It was still pretty good, but wasn't as nutty as it was. But people wanted the thing back, which confused a lot of sweats and a lot of streamers. But the drum gun was voted upon. The weapon burst free from its pillar, rose up into the sky, and then the vault regurgitated us all out of it into the sky, and we thought that would be the end of the event. No. In days leading up to the event, the volcano began smoking, hinting that an eruption was close. And at the end of the unvaulting period, it was time for the eruption. All the players in the lobby were tossed up into the air and were forced to glide around indefinitely until the next segment of the event was over. Large volcanic rocks began to shoot out of the volcano across the map. The first rock hit Retail Row, devastating the place and destroying it entirely. The next rock flew all the way over to the base of Polar Peak, striking around here. I don't know if you can really see that, but it's close to one of the houses in Greasy Grove. It hit the base of the peak, causing a large crack to extend up the side of the island. Or the mountain, sorry. Causing a large crack to span up the side of the mountain. And also revealed an eyeball staring back out. The final rock launched up into the air before splitting into 4 or 5 smaller rocks and fell onto Tilted Towers, destroying the place entirely. And then one more giant rock came over and nuked Tilted. Ironically, the only place to survive was the formerly unlucky building, No Sweat Insurance, which you can see right where my mouse is now. After all this was over, players could land back into these POIs, both retail and tilted, land in the ruins of it, walk around. The entire sky was pitch black. There was fire everywhere. It was a really cool ambience. And then the rest of the match would go as usual. I believe that this map, or this event happened, had its own playlist mate, potentially. Because most of the videos I see of it were in a sort of like 50v50 type of a deal. And I think people could even respawn, so it didn't have as much stakes as some of the previous event matches did. Like with the butterfly event in Season 6, after it was over, you went back to your regular match. You just killed each other as usual. I think with this one, it happened in a mode where you could respawn, so maybe it wasn't as gratifying to some to not be able to truly win the event match, but whatever. It was a really cool event. Set the stage for Season 9 well, and also made some pretty big decisions by demolishing 2 of the game's most loved POIs. And also leaving some curiosity at Polar Peak, a location that hadn't had much traction since the start of Season 7. With now this crack going up the side of it, and a potential monster lurking underneath. This would take us into Season 9. But I didn't get to fully play Season 8. I played like a month and a half of it. Got a fair bit of experience. Had fun while it lasted, but the Fortnite hate train and the actual physical lag, both frame rate and then the game like bugging out on me, preventing me from having the full fun experience. But from what I remember of it, and I had fun with what I could play until everything kicked in. But I'm not going to rank it because of my own experience in this part. From looking back at it, watching other people's perspectives of the season from their own gameplay, and from the positives I do remember, I will give Season 8 an S. There was a lot to see and do. It added another new biome that was really cool. And it did a lot. So, Season 8, you're going to get an S from me. I'm going to start us off with Season 9, however my voice is starting to tire. So, I'm only going to cover the map changes. And we're going to come back next stream and finish this off. I think we're going to just make this like a little mini series of streaming these rankings every couple weeks. Or maybe start doing it more regularly so we can get through it faster. But Season 9 introduced 3 new POIs and a remixed one. We had Neo Tilted, Mega Mall, Loot Lake got a new rendition of a new version of the vault with power cords leading everywhere, and Pressure Plant. We also had airships all across the map. Season 8 also introduced reboot vans, and more of these were added in Season 9 to more unnamed POIs, so you'd have better chance of rebooting your teammates. Pinging was also added in Season 8, and this got also a bit of a remix as well, making it more useful in Season 9. And the lava in Dusty Divot became stagnant, staying where it is. But not much else changed. The slipstream encompassed most of the center of the map. The outskirts are relatively unaffected by it. People weren't too happy with Neo Tilted or Mega Mall. I thought they were cool. I had similar issues with Season 9 as I did with Season 8 with the game not rendering in properly. Meaning a lot of it was unplayable. Got the battle pass again, got like halfway through it, close to halfway through it. Then quit again because Hate Train and, the graphical and gameplay issues that I just couldn't get past. And from then on out, I took the hiatus for almost the rest of the chapter. I did come back for Season X temporarily on PS4. We'll talk about that when we get to Season X. But the map changes, in my opinion, I liked Neo Tilted and Mega Mall. Pressure Plant was fine. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. The Vault Loot Lake thing didn't really land for me. It felt really way too open. Not as much loot. Again, Loot Lake, despite its name, was never known for its loot. It was always kind of a meh POI. Granted, they did add a couple more buildings in the factory area at Loot Lake, which had some decent loot. And then the military-esque installation over here, and the ruined pirate place still had some good loot. So you could walk out of here with some decent loot. But I wasn't a big fan of the open area here. Leaky Lake was always a death trap. And the vault thing didn't change that. It was still really scuffed if you were out in this area. Pressure Plant was fine. I loved the volcano. Didn't like Pressure Plant as much. However, once the mech started getting constructed, that was cool. And the loot you could get wasn't terrible either. We'll talk about the Battle Pass and loot and the live event and everything else when we come back for our next part for the video, for the stream, for this little stream series. However, once again, my voice is wearing thin. So I am going to stop us here. Thank you folks for tuning in. I sincerely hope you enjoyed part 2 of this. I will do part 3 here in the foreseeable future. Maybe even over the next couple of days. Who knows? Stay tuned. Keep an eye out on the channel for another stream. But we will see when that is. And again, once again, the near future. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. And as always,